Hello. In our last video I talked about the massive church building programme that took place after the Norman conquest, when around 6,000 churches were built or rebuilt, sweeping away their Anglo-Saxon predecessors and making a fairly thorough job of it. Nevertheless, there are still remains from that earlier period to be found. The Anglo-Saxons built primarily in timber, and you can see an example of the technique at St Andrew's Church, Greenstead in Essex. It was once thought to be Anglo-Saxon in period, but the most recent dendro dates indicate around 1066. Still the oldest wooden church in the world, the oldest wooden building in Europe, and it would have been built by Anglo-Saxon craftsmen. It's built of split oak logs that are tenoned into a wooden sill. The bricks are Victorian, and the tops are bevelled to fit into a grooved wall plate and secured with wooden pegs known as trash nails, and the sides slot together tongue and groove style. It would originally have been thatched. A handful of Anglo-Saxon stone-built churches survive more or less intact. This is St Peter on the Wall in an isolated coastal setting near Bradwell-on-Sea in Essex. We saw this in part 5 of the series on monasteries, has its origins in the 650s. Narrow and tall, this is characteristic of Anglo-Saxon church buildings, and it was used as a barn before restoration in the 1920s, and it contains recycled fragments from a Roman fort. This is St John's Church, Essex in County Durham. It's in the Wear Valley, a couple of miles from Bishop Auckland, built around 670, and again contains fabric recycled from a nearby Roman fort, in this case Binchester, Roman Vinovia. It's been re-roofed and some larger windows have been inserted alongside the smaller original Anglo-Saxon windows. The plan is a two-cell, a nave and a small chancel. And again, this is typical of Anglo-Saxon churches, and particularly the early Anglo-Saxon churches. The same ground plan is evident at the excavated foundations of the church of St Bertolin, late Anglo-Saxon. St Bertolin was a local saint, outside the present St Mary's in Stafford. This is St Lawrence's Chapel, Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire. It was replaced in the 19th century by Holy Trinity Church, which was built opposite, but it contains the remains of an Anglo-Saxon church for which we have documentary evidence taking the story back to around 800. But on the building there's some blind arcading which suggests later Romanesque influence, so perhaps around the 1050s. St Mary's Priory Church, Deerhurst in Gloucester, was a former Anglo-Saxon monastery, dates to around 800, has been much restored, and there's a rich mix of styles from all architectural periods, but they include Anglo-Saxon fabric. For example, the blocked chancel arch, some doorways, typically Anglo-Saxon by their small size, windows and sculpture. This Madonna and Child in the tower has been dated to around about 800. And just 100 yards away we have Odder's Chapel, now in the care of English Heritage. Again this simple two-cell plan, nave and chancel, again characteristically narrow and tall. Built by Earl Odder in 1056 in memory of his brother Alfric, now built into a timber-framed farmhouse and was once part of a manorial complex. St James Church, Avebury, has late Anglo-Saxon origins, dates to around about 1000, although much has been added to it subsequently. Again, we have this two-cell ground plan, and the aisles are added in the 12th century and other extensions followed. But the nave walls were originally the external walls, and in those 2 Anglo-Saxon windows survive, and they would have been unglazed. A rebate is cut into the outer edge, where a wooden shutter would have been wedged during bad weather. At St Mary's Church, Bremer, near Fordingbridge in Hampshire, where we looked at an Anglo-Saxon rood painting in part 4, again many subsequent phases of alteration to the building, but a lot of Anglo-Saxon fabric remaining. This was an Anglo-Saxon minster, a mother church, home to several priests serving the surrounding area, and in this case it was a royal minster at the centre of a royal estate, and the person behind the building is almost certainly Athelred II, Athelred the Unready, and would date to around about 1000. Hard to unpick how much of the flint walling is Anglo-Saxon. Undoubtedly some of it is, and it all would originally have been plastered. The Anglo-Saxon church was significantly larger than what we see today. The church we see today is about 96 feet in length. This is about 3/4 of the size of the Anglo-Saxon church. It's lost a western chamber, which was probably a baptistry, and it once had a north and south porticus, side chapels, not transepts. Only the south porticus has survived, narrower than the crossing with a tower above. It's still an advanced design for the time and a step towards the now familiar cruciform ground plan of many churches. The east side of the south porticus still has Anglo-Saxon window above a later Norman arch. Notice particularly the long vertical quoin stones bedded on alternating horizontal slabs. This is known as long and short work, and it's important. This is diagnostic of Anglo-Saxon buildings. You usually see it at the quoins, and there are other examples I can show you here. This is St Michael's Church, Stanton by Bridge in Derbyshire. This is All Saints Church at Bradbourne, also in Derbyshire. All Saints Church, Earls Barton in Northamptonshire, has an unusually decorative Anglo-Saxon tower. Anglo-Saxon masonry tends to be plain. Here we have pilasters, strapwork and a unique 5-light arcade. The tower is Anglo-Saxon, not the church. There may never have been an Anglo-Saxon church attached, possibly just the tower. The ground floor used as a nave with a tiny chancel attached. There's an example of this design at St Peter's, Barton upon Humber. The upper storey providing accommodation for a priest, safe haven for storage and a place of refuge during Danish incursions in the 10th century. You can see the doorway above a simple triangular headed 2-light window in the south wall. Access would have required a ladder, which could then be pulled up in an emergency. Again we have this distinctive diagnostic long and short work in the quoins. Despite medieval and later alterations, arguably the most impressive and substantial Anglo-Saxon survival is All Saints Church, Brixworth in Northamptonshire, most likely built by Mercian royalty. Possibly King Offa in the 8th century, but it may be earlier, it may be 7th century, and it's ample proof of the architectural sophistication of which the Anglo-Saxons were capable. There is a Saxon base to the tower and substantial Anglo-Saxon fabric in the nave. A block door above the west entrance indicates that was once a gallery here, perhaps where the Mercian royalty sat. The triple arch above, Anglo-Saxon, is a later phase, early 11th century, and it cuts across and blocks the door. Outside there is a polygonal apse, and an ambulatory here once led pilgrims around a crypt. That walkway is now roofless. The crypt would once have housed the relics of a saint. And again we have recycled Roman fabric. There's brick and tile in the arches. Just a few examples of churches with Anglo-Saxon remains. I hope you'll join me next time for a new topic and a new series. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is available. Or you can subscribe by clicking on the rose window over my shoulder.